Something that used to occur once in 40 or 50 years is now occurring once every decade, once every 5 years. Let's say if it's 2047, India at 2047, what kind of India we're going to be in? Yes, we're going to be economically developed. We aim to be a developed country by then in terms of per capita income. But then we also have to think about how do we do that without destroying our natural capital. We need a big campaign on nutrition literacy. And if you look at social media now, it's quite confusing because you have a lot of claims and counterclaims being made and a lot of marketing of food which is unhealthy. So we are actually heading at a very fast speed into an unknown that human beings have never experienced. Let's think about this as saving ourselves, and in our own self-interest, we need to act now.
My first question would be that how is global climate change? How do you see the global climate change impacting health issues across the globe, especially since we are seeing a rise in, say, cardiovascular diseases among the young people. Now we are also seeing children having heart attack, and then obesity also be rising. Some countries have recognized obesity as a disease, while some countries still consider a lifestyle disorder.
Yes, thank you very much, Pranjal. It's a pleasure to be with you. I think you've asked a very important question, but it's also true that climate change is impacting us and our health in many different ways and through many different pathways. There are direct effects of climate change that we can understand, like heat, for example, which all of us can experience. And we know that that's going to be a major issue in India in the years to come. We also know that the frequency and scale of natural climatic disasters like floods and cyclones or droughts, the frequency of those are increasing. So all of these have always occurred from time immemorial, but something that used to occur once in 40 or 50 years is now occurring once every decade, once every 5 years. Unseasonal rain, for example, the whole season's rain coming in one day and so on. So these are changes which are natural. Then, of course, many of these, of course, have been climate change itself is contributed to by humankind's activities since the Industrial Revolution. So certainly the increase in greenhouse gases has contributed to it. So human beings have been responsible to a large extent for what we see. But then there are the indirect effects of climate change through impacting the vector ecology and behavior. So mosquitoes and ticks and other kinds of vectors of disease, which traditionally were in a certain geography, now have expanded their geographies. They become unseasonal. And the very fact that we've seen these very dramatic increases in dengue outbreaks, not just in India, but in many parts of the world, shows that those mosquitoes, the Aedes mosquitoes, have really adapted themselves especially to urban landscapes and are now present for larger, longer parts of the year than they used to be in the past. You also have the impact of climate change on health through the pathway of agriculture, food systems, and nutrition, because again, there's depletion of water, there is the changing weather patterns are impacting crop yields. More and more, we will see that traditional crop varieties may not be able to survive in the kind of temperatures that we're going to be seeing. So you're going to need to move to more climate resilient crops like millets, and also do more research on climate resilient mainstream crops. And that is already impacting our nutrition. Our dietary diversity has been reducing over the years because partly of climate change, but more importantly, I think our own behaviors have changed. Biodiversity is getting less. So what our grandparents ate, the kind of variety of vegetables and fruits, seasonal, that they would eat, we no longer do that. Now, this is naturally leading to certain diseases being on the rise. And today, if you see what are the most important risk factors for our health, they are pollution, mainly air pollution, but also, of course, water pollution, heavy metals and so on, pesticides in the water. And the other one is dietary risks. So more than half the world's population does not get an adequate nutritious diet for the day. And this is partly affordability, accessibility, and so on. But the fact remains that dietary risks and pollution are the two biggest risks to health today in India, as well as large parts of the developing world.
So in context of that, what role should the governments and global health organizations play in order to ensure these issues are checked on time? Because if there are no concrete steps taken right now, the issues might grow, and some governments even fail to recognize these issues as an issue itself, right?
No, that's very true, and I believe that it all starts with data. Unless we have high quality data on multiple aspects, we have to look not only at the diseases that we have, but also at the exposures and the risk factors and what are called the social, economic, and environmental determinants of health. Because health is a composite of all of this. It's not just about illness, which is the end point. And usually the touch point with the medical system is when you become ill. But the goal should be to promote health. And in fact, that is what the Ayushman Bharat program is about. It is about strengthening primary healthcare, which includes preventive and health promotive aspects, in addition to, of course, providing access to healthcare when you need it. So we need good data. And this is why I have been advocating for the environment, agriculture, health, and maybe one or two other ministries and departments to really come together to say, can we share this data? Can we share the data on climate and how it's changing, on biodiversity and how that is changing, on crops and nutrition, as well as on diseases? And we could add things like vectors and animal diseases. So the whole concept of One Health is really about looking at these things holistically. And then, because we know that a change in any one of these has repercussions on other things. Any one species dying out, we might not think that makes such a big difference, but everything is interconnected. And it could be many years before we realize that species dying out has, all sorts of implications for our own health, or certain species becoming more prevalent, and what we call invasive species and so on. So there was a mission called the National Mission on Biodiversity and Human Wellbeing that was conceptualized by quite a few people actually from around India. This was a few years ago. And I think it was a very well thought through program, which addressed all these interconnected issues and said, let's bring all of the data together in one platform. And then, of course, have thematic areas where different organizations could work. So I believe that this is the time really for us to take that holistic perspective, to actually bring, rather than working in silos, to bring different groups together, to share that data and to share experiences, and actually to then have a vision for the future as to, let's say, if it's 2047, India at 2047, what kind of India we're going to be in. Yes, we're going to be economically developed. We aim to be a developed country by then in terms of per capita income. But then we also have to think about how do we do that without destroying our natural capital? Because economists have now clearly given us the calculations for the value that nature brings, and the fact that if we lose that, then we're actually going to make a dent on our GDP. So while we consider economic development side by side, we also have to look at social capital, human capital, financial capital, all of that, but the natural capital. And India is one of the biodiversity rich countries in the world. It's a biodiversity hotspot. And so we need actually a national program to really protect, conserve, and use sustainably what we have, so that people can have sustainable livelihoods and economic progress, but not at the cost of ecological security.
So, on that, we also need early interventions at different levels, because, you talk about nutrition, you talk about sustainability, but if, say, a child is not taught about it in the schools, or parents don't know what kind of food their child should eat, then we're not making any progress in that area.
Absolutely. It has to start from childhood. And these things have to be inculcated right from very early age, both by the parents at home, but also by schools. So I was happy to hear that the Chief Minister of Tamil Nadu just 2 days ago announced that every school in Tamil Nadu would now have an eco club. And hopefully that will create a lot more awareness, not just about our environment, but also about things like good diet, good nutrition, how to avoid pollution, how to reduce the use of plastic, recycling, and caring about other living beings in our environment. Because many children who grow up in cities today may not realize that actually even in an urban environment, there is biodiversity, just that we don't notice it. And so that kind of education, when you open children's eyes to, there could be small things, insects and grasses and plants in your neighborhood, the presence of butterflies and how that indicates a healthy environment, they could start tracking. So we need much more of citizen science and citizen tracking also in our country, because there's a limit to what scientists can do. But if all citizens get empowered with this knowledge, then of course it becomes a movement.
So do we have any examples from across the globe where like we run a midday meal program? So through that, how can we improve our children's health so that there's a future which is healthier and also sustainable?
India, in fact, you mentioned the midday meal program. I think India can be very proud of having the largest school meal program in the world, the largest and maybe even the oldest midday meal program. Of course, some states in India started much earlier than other states, but currently it's a national program. There is potential to actually add value to that by also creating nutrition awareness, nutrition literacy amongst the children who are consuming that. Also, to improve the quality of the midday meal by making sure that it's not just calories, but also they get the right protein as well as all the micronutrients. I think the problem in Indian diet today is that we have lost our dietary diversity. We have less amount of fruits, vegetables, nuts, and dairy on our plate. And in fact, Indian households are spending more and more of their household budget on processed and ready-to-eat foods, which we know are nutritionally much lower than a freshly cooked meal. So the midday meal, which is in most instances a freshly cooked, prepared meal in the school, can be a very good vehicle for both improving the nutrition status of children, but also of creating that awareness, because then they take it back home. For example, simple things like adding a little bit of vitamin C to the meal. It could be a slice of guava, it could be a lemon. It increases iron absorption and can address the issue of anemia that has been so difficult to address.
Right. So, I mean, you raised an important issue of anemia. And usually when we talk about anemia, we tend to forget that, especially in a country like India, women are most prone to being anemic than men. Right. And similarly, in rural areas, women are most prone to suffering from pollution because of the fuel they use, because of the woods that is being burned in cooking. They're most exposed to these things. How can the government address these challenges? Because that is also impact. I mean, that's an area we are completely forgetting. I mean, Ujjwala scheme was started, but is there a follow-up? What else can be done?
Yeah, that's very right. And this is why I mentioned the environmental risks to our health today. So when we talk about air pollution, it's both indoor or household air pollution, which also contributes to the outdoor air pollution. In fact, it's not very well appreciated that in large parts of India, the household air pollution, because of solid biomass burning for cooking, is contributing 30 to 40% of the outdoor air pollution. So addressing this, and we already have this wonderful Ujjwala scheme, where practically every Indian household today, however poor they are, they have a LPG connection. But many of them are not able to afford the refills. So if we could have a targeted subsidy for the poorest households and reduce the price of LPG for them, we could immediately eliminate indoor air pollution. It would be good for the woman's health, and most likely she also has small children sitting with her when she's cooking. So small children and women are inhaling this very, very toxic air. And it would immediately also reduce our levels of outdoor air pollution, which is something that everybody is now concerned about. And obviously you're addressing a big gender issue here as well as an economic equity issue. I think public transport is another one because it addresses the pollution issue by reducing the number of cars on the road. If you have good public transport, you can incentivize people to take that and disincentivize people from taking out their own cars, especially to drive into city centers. And it will improve physical activity, which is also reducing very, very quickly and leading to this rise in obesity that you mentioned. So both ends of the spectrum, the undernutrition that we still have, particularly in young children, the anemia, which is as a result of deficiencies of a number of micronutrients, and obesity and overweight, which is growing, particularly among urban women. All of these could be addressed by paying attention to certain policy levers which build on existing programs. So we already have a good public transport system. How do we strengthen that? We already have the Ujjwala scheme. How do we strengthen it? How do we make our school meals even more nutritious, and combine it with activities like Poshan Vatika in the school, which children have to themselves work, in the garden to understand how to grow and eat those nutritious plants. Plus, I think we need a big campaign on nutrition literacy. And if you look at social media now, it's quite confusing because you have a lot of claims and counterclaims being made and a lot of marketing of food which is unhealthy, but which is pretending to be healthy. So we definitely need much stricter regulation on the promotion and advertising of food and on labeling. And I'm very happy that this was mentioned in the budget speech of the finance minister, and even the prime minister has talked about the importance of addressing the rising obesity problem in our country.
Right. So one more question on that, when you've clearly pointed out different links between climate, health, and nutrition. What we are also seeing is that India is slowly moving away from the agricultural practices which were there, and there's a large migration happening to cities because of which agriculture is suffering. So what steps should be taken in that direction so that one, agriculture becomes sustainable, which will only be possible, which will only lead to better nutrition, better opportunities for people?
No, that's a very, very important question because as I think everybody recognizes that the agriculture that's currently practiced today, which is very resource intensive, does end up depleting the ground water as well as depleting the quality of the soil. And over a period of time, now there is clear evidence that the nutrient content of the same plants is much lower now, because obviously the soil doesn't have the nutrients the plant also will not have. And therefore, then what we eat is also not as nutritious as it should be. So there are now, I think, many examples of what is called regenerative agriculture or natural farming, not necessarily fully organic, but certainly going towards organic, which has been shown to be good for the soil and the environment, definitely much better for farmers' health, and can be done without reducing the yield, because obviously a very important measure is the yield of nobody wants our yields to go down because we still have to feed 1.4 billion people. But I think the science and the research is urgently needed now to validate the methods of regenerative agriculture, or whatever we want to call it, sustainable agriculture, which can provide us the food and not compromise our food security. Also provide us nutrition, because we must talk about nutrition security now, not just food security, and without damaging the environment or the soil or the water, because obviously these are all in limited quantities and we have to live, leave for our children and grandchildren, the next generations as well. So to my mind, this is a very, very important and urgent issue that you have just touched upon. I think that there are solutions. There's a lot of scientific advances and technologies today, both on the genetic genomic side, things like the CRISPR technology, which is now able to gene edit traits in and out of plants. You can use that. But we also have satellite technology. We have in IT and digital tools. Of course, artificial intelligence can also help us to study, measure, document, the exact processes and steps that should be used, which can then go through the process of scaling up. But farmers need to be convinced that if you're asking them to move from one type of agriculture to another, that their incomes will not reduce and hopefully will actually increase, and that their quality of life will improve as well. So this is an area where we need interdisciplinary research. So we need agricultural research institutes to come together with the health research centers and do this kind of work together.
So, Dr. Swaminathan, my last question, and I mean, if you have to simply give out a message to common people and the government vis-a-vis health, climate, what would that message be?
Well, I think the message that I would give is that climate change, to me, is really all about our health. Of course, it's also about the health of all the other living beings. And we see the rate of loss of species is increasing so rapidly, never before in the history has this happened. So we are actually heading at a very fast speed into an unknown that human beings have never experienced. What, plus 1.5 degrees, plus 2 degrees, plus 2.5 degrees scenario is going to look like will be for the first time in the history of mankind. And we are entering uncharted territory. So this is the time to really come together to think about these. Focus, of course, we should not take our eye off the mitigation issue of reducing greenhouse gases, and the world has to continue to do that. But we also have to look at adaptation very, very quickly, whether it's the fields of agriculture, whether it's in fisheries, or whether it's about health and just lives of people. In cities, adaptation will look different from rural areas. In every agroecology, it's going to look a little bit different. And we know the most vulnerable people are the ones who are going to be first affected and most badly affected as well. So let's think about this as saving ourselves. And in our own self-interest, we need to act now. And I think there are things which can be done. And as I said, we do have a lot of tools today that we may not have had 20 or 30 years ago that we have at our disposal. If we use them wisely, then I think that we can hopefully survive much better, in this changing environment.
Thanks a lot, Dr. Swaminathan, for giving us your time.
Thank you very much.